Okay, should be recording. Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming. This is lesson 3 for Software Saturdays. And again, as a reminder, please take a moment and fill out the attendance form you guys see on screen here. It's on Slack as well, and the slides there. Or I think Minji put a link to it in the chat. Thank you very much for that. If you want to just copy it from there as well. If you are watching the recording, anyone watching the recording online right now, also please fill out the attendance form if you haven't already. It just helps us keep track of who is watching, who is coming, stuff like that. All right, before we begin, were there any questions about week 1, week 2, HTML, JavaScript, anything like that, even about the course in general, before we begin the week 3 material? You guys can put them in chat or just say them out loud if you want to unmute yourselves there. Any way is okay with me. I am not currently seeing any questions. That's all right. So it's time to jump into week 3. So week 3 is basic VueJS. So as a quick reminder for everyone, here's the plan for the semester. We are currently on week 3 of 7. As everyone can see here, we only have 2 more learning sessions left. We're almost there, halfway there almost. And then 2 project days to work on the final project, which will probably be due the week or so after lesson 7. I have to verify my dates here real quick. But I'll have more info about the final project for everyone on week 5. All right, and as a reminder to everyone again, help available. We have lots of help available if you want to practice. Obviously, you have these sessions every Thursday. We also have the recordings every Sunday, the open review hours, the Slack channels, everything. I kind of same info from the past couple of weeks. Please use them. People have been, and I think it's been a great help for everyone. And as again, please open up your text editor if you don't have one, VS Code. I think everyone here should already have one though, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. And as always, the demo files are on GitHub, the master branch, you guys can see them here. The lesson 2 branch has now been updated, so you guys can get all the demos, plus some minor updates from lesson 2. Otherwise, look at lesson 3 demos here. All right, let's jump into it. Part 1, VueJS. So what is VueJS? Well, VueJS, simply enough, is a popular JavaScript library. There are quite a few of these JavaScript libraries out there, some of them more popular than others. You might be familiar with ones like, for example, React is extremely popular, or Angular, also extremely popular. Vue is very similar, but a little bit different. It allows us to create user interfaces easily and quickly. And the keywords here are easily and quickly. A big reason why people really like React is that you can really prototype things very quickly and you can demo it with just regular old HTML. If you've ever used something like React, for example, you can know that React is pretty annoying to set up and use, right? It's very difficult. But with Vue, it's as easy as just adding a couple lines and your page is good to go. It's very common what are called single page applications, also known as web apps, which is the name of this course. And that's kind of the idea where a single web page, for example, Google Docs, let's make an example, can do multiple features like, going to be slides, looking at different documents, editing text, all that advanced stuff using a single URL, just a docs like google.com URL. And you can use Vue to emulate something like that very quickly and very, very fast, like as a development standpoint. So Vue mainly has a couple of major features why it's so popular and so efficient. The first one is called a shadow DOM. So DOM is an acronym that stands for something you don't really need to worry about, but essentially just know that the DOM represents the page that the user is seeing, like the actual HTML screen, that's the HTML page and the CSS is being rendered to the end user. So what Vue does is it makes what we call like a shadow DOM, or like a very nice copy of what the user sees. And what we do is we can make changes to the copy of this screen that are then updated to the actual screen. And what that means is when we say we make an update in Vue, it'll automatically be copied over to the actual screen that the users see, but much more efficiently than us humans can. So everyone kind of hopefully practiced a little bit about changing HTML and CSS last week in the checkpoint number 3. And you guys could see how kind of annoying it can be, right? To find the element and change the element and .inner HTML and add and all that fun stuff. But with Vue, all we have to do is change one line of code and it'll automatically sync it up much better than we ever could hope to do it, as a human here. And that's where Vue's power comes in. So how do we actually add Vue to a web page? Well, if you want to add Vue, all you need to do is add the script tag you guys see right here to the head section of your HTML. And that is where Vue's power really comes in. It's very easy to make, for example, like an old site your company already has is a very popular example, automatically use Vue, but just adding in this one line of code. Whereas if like we want to make the whole thing in React, we'd have to rewrite the whole thing. So if anyone who took React last semester is maybe familiar with that, if not, don't worry about it. If you want to learn React though, we have a great series about that on our YouTube page. Now, if you're feeling a little bit more advanced, you kind of want to dabble into the more industry accepted side of Vue, you can look at something called Vue CLI, which is kind of like a command line tool you can use to create Vue projects, similar to how we created React projects using NPM. If you don't know what NPM is, you don't want to dabble with command line tools, no worries there. Just stick with the Vue stuff you see here, and everything will be just fine. All right, let's try to jump into Vue itself now. So we're going to cover some basic how to add Vue to a page, and then we'll do a demo program and talk about some more stuff after that. So inside your Vue JavaScript file, after you add the script tag, like I mentioned in the slide before this, you have to define the Vue instance and tell it where to mount. Well, what does this really mean? Well, we need a root element where the site is located. Essentially, this is more like saying, all right, well, Vue doesn't know exactly where the HTML we want to change is, because it could be the case that maybe there's only a part of the page that we want there to be Vue located on. Oh, 1 second here, I have a comment here I need to look at. No problem there. All right. Oh my, it's passing on me. So what we do is we call a root element here. Now, that doesn't mean like it has to be a tag named root. It can just be a tag, anything you want. Typically, it's a div tag, because again, divs kind of act as invisible groupings for other tags. And any child tag or any kind of tag nested inside of the div tag or that root tag is going to fall under the control of Vue, meaning we can use all the features Vue allows us to just from that tag alone. No, this seems kind of complicated, but trust me, it's as simple as adding, an ID of app to your code. It's very easy to do. And typically the standard is every piece of HTML inside of your body tag should be encapsulated into a single div with the ID of app. But you can see an example of that on my lesson. The demo is coming up. So how do we actually change the HTML quickly? We can use something called mustache formatting, or text formatting is the other name for it, to automatically replace text with the value of a JavaScript variable, which seems very wild, right? Like, how can you do that? Well, think back to how we could have done it last week. What we did is we would take, for example, the inner HTML. We would then, concatenate the value of, say, fizzbuzz, I think was the example we used, to that string, and then save that string back to the page. Well, all we have to do here is change the value of any variable. And if it's using this mustache formatting, which we'll see in the next slide, it'll automatically sync up and work just like we wanted it to. So how to actually use mustache or text formatting? Well, here's a really basic, kind of incomplete example of a way you can get it to work. So as you guys can see, here's my root element. Again, it's a div with the ID of app, as I just mentioned a little bit earlier. Very easy to, kind of figure out how to make this, not too complicated. And then here's a mustache formatting right there. You guys can see here on line 2, I guess, technically. It's the double brackets, like it's gonna be a curly brace, then it's the variable name, curly brace, curly brace. Now, this is very similar to, like, again, if you're familiar with React, I'm going to bring you back to the idea of how you would inject JavaScript into a page. This is somewhat similar, not exactly, but somewhat. And what Vue will do is automatically change the value of these double bracket message to the value stored in the variable message. And how do we do that with Vue? So here's our JavaScript code. It's in separate file, obviously not the same file. Let app, so again, let defines a new variable, app equals new Vue. So new Vue tells it that we're trying to make a new Vue instance that'll run on this page. And how do you format this Vue instance? Well, we add this little open parenthesis, close parenthesis, like we do normally. And then we have this little kind of like bracket here, then closing bracket down here. You guys can maybe see that down there. We'll go over into more detail in the demo, but basically Vue takes its parameters, not as a regular old parameter that we did normally in JavaScript functions, but as like a JSON object or a JavaScript in the format of a JavaScript object. So think back to JavaScript objects, the idea of key value pairs, and that is how Vue kind of works. The idea being the key, then a colon, and then some value that Vue will interpret however it wants to. But before we spend all this time on the single little demo here, let's jump in demo program 1. I think it'll make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. So that's demo 3, not demo 1. So I have demo 1 here. Demo 1 is a pretty basic demo. I just, basic CSS file, nothing too fancy there. Remember, the HTML. All we have to do is add this line. It might look a bit different. Don't worry about it. It's this line right here. The script tag, and it has to be in the head section of the of our HTML page. If it is not in the head section, your code, your script may not load the way you want it to load. So always put it in the head section. Then we have the regular quick body tag. I got some H1, H2s, and then I have the script where I load in my JavaScript in the very bottom, and then I have this div tag here. So as you can see, I gave this div an ID of app. And again, that just tells Vue that I want to put the actual code, not the code, but I want to put all the Vue stuff inside of that little app section there. Elijah asks, can you escape the double curly braces if you actually wanted it as plain text? I'm not sure that you could escape it, only because I think that it's not going to be, escapes don't work the way you think they do in HTML. They're very finicky with escapes. If you wanted to just use the curly braces with Vue, a very, very good workaround that I would just recommend you do is just use like a regular text formatting, but just set the value of your variable to the curly brace. I think that's probably the best method. There probably are other ways to do it. I'm not familiar on top of my head how you do that, but that's how I would do it, is as a quick, dirty fix. So we have two H tags that are just, lesson, basic, kind of like what kind of demo we're doing here. And here the magic of Vue happens. I have two P tags here, this first little P tag and the second set of P tags. And the second P tag has that mustache or text formatting. So as you can see, it has the double curly braces and the name of a variable inside here, message. And then the same thing for this one here, other message. Now, if you pull up the demo, we pull you up next to me actually, so we can see them both at the same time here. You can see them kind of both at the same time. You make it a bit bigger. I think it might be a bit small. There we go. Yes, go one side. Here is the JavaScript file. So I have a const. You can use let. Not a big problem. Whatever you want to do is okay with me. App equals new Vue. Again, new Vue telling us that we want a new Vue object instance. And again, here is that JSON structured data here. So the first one here is EL. We'll go over all the kind of fields you have to worry about towards the end of today. The two you only have to know about now are L and data. So again, the way it works is you're going to put the name of the field, a colon, a colon, then some value, and then a comma at the end. A comma there too. So EL, short for element, just tells it which element it wants to mount on. So in this case, I want it to mount on the ID app. And if you look back at our HTML, the ID app responds to this div tag. And so therefore Vue will apply to this div tag and all of the P tags inside of the div tag. Anything inside of it is also included in the Vue instance. Next is the data property. So the data is going to be, again, your list of, I call them variables. It's not the proper term, but it's good enough for our purposes. It's basically the set of variables that we use to reference, data we want to store in the actual Vue page. So the way you do data is, again, it's actually also a JavaScript object. So in reality, you actually have two JavaScript objects, the main like parameter Vue one and the smaller one for your data. So as you can see, again, it's kind of like any other JavaScript object. You got the name, the key, and then the value. You have a key, then we have the value. So how does this work exactly? Well, as you can see, message here is, here's a message, and other message here is, this message is like JavaScript variables. And what that'll do is it'll replace this entire blob here with the value of message, and this entire blob here with the value of other message. So how does that look? Well, if you load up our page, again, load up when you would any other HTML page. There we go. You can see here is the lesson 3 demo 1 page. And as you can see here, the message bracketing got replaced with, here's a message. And the second one got replaced with, these messages are like JavaScript variables, exactly what you wanted them to look like. And also, let me actually move this over a little bit so I can grab the screen easier. Here's where the power of Vue comes in. If I open up my console terminal, that's a little too big, my goodness. And I open up my console here, my actual JavaScript console, what I can do is I can actually modify the text right here. So what I can do is I'm going to make this screen just a little bit smaller. I can see it. And I'm going to run some practice code here. So here's what I'm going to say. The way you would change it outside the Vue instance, it's a bit different if you want to change it from within the Vue instance, is you name the name you gave your variable where Vue located. So app was the one I gave it, dot, and then the name of the variable, in this case, message. So I'm going to set message equal to this message has been changed. And now if I run my code, watch what happens. It automatically changes the text that appears on screen to the value of message. And as you can see, the other one's still just intact. Is intact. We could change it to, so app dot other message, and that's going to be, let's say, this is software Saturdays. And again, if we run some semicolons there, my bad. And if we run this code, you can see it actually has changed both messages now. It even changed the bottom one too. So you can see how powerful it is that you can change on the fly what the user sees to match some kind of data. And don't have to do all the fancy HTML that we did last time. It's as quick as just, change your variable and you're good to go. All right, that was demo 1. Were there any questions about demo program number 1? Should I keep on this page here for a little bit longer? All right, not a problem. Okay, now it's time for checkpoint number 1. This checkpoint won't be too long. My count is currently 354. So we're going to say 410, 415 or so should be enough time for everyone. Just practice adding Vue to a page and then create the data fields and set some properties and the text formatting. So kind of similar to how we did the demo program, but just try it on your own, using only the slides, and don't copy code from my demo program. Just see if you can do it yourself. All right. So I hope that was checkpoint. That was checkpoint number 1. I hope it was a good review for everyone on how to kind of add Vue to a web page. Were there any kind of questions you guys felt weren't answered in your breakout sessions that maybe I can answer here before we jump into section 2? All right, no problems there. So it's time to jump into part 2. V directives. So V directives are what Vue uses to handle and change HTML very, very easily. You can control these kind of changes by using a V directive, where the V kind of describes what Vue's directives. So you can kind of think of them that way. So here are the 5 main, or kind of only actually, V directives that we're going to cover in this course. You can write your own ones, but that's kind of advanced. So we're only going to be using a combination of these 5 to do basically everything. VBind, VIF, vModel, vOn, and v4. And we'll go through all of them one by one. We'll cover v4 next week because I think it fits better with the more intermediate Vue stuff, but we'll cover the top 4 this week. So first up is vBind. So vBind will, as I quote, bind an HTML property to the value of a JavaScript variable. Any property can be bound, including a source, an href, the title for an image, you name it. If it is not, for example, if it's like in like that space in the property equals quote side that you put for any HTML property, you can bind it using v-bind. If you modify, the powerful part is if you modify the variable, the property will also change, meaning that you can change the actual way your page looks and works in real time as well. Maybe, for example, loading in a new image or changing the SRC of an image on the fly, or changing what the rollover, the hover text is of like an image or some other text, or even changing, for example, what classes or styles your code may have. So here's how you would use vBind. You just literally type the words vBind : before the property. The one change here is that in the quotes after the equal sign, where for example, this SRC tag I got here on the bottom, you would normally put like the hyperlink to the image you wanted to source. In this case, all you do is you put the name of the JavaScript variable. In this case, I need my variable, some data. So I'll go through the top 3 here. So vBind, vIf, and vOn, or yeah, we'll see what the top 3 are. vModel, I think. And then we'll do a big demo at the very end with all of them kind of combined. So if you have any questions on the interim, please let me know. Again, you can bind any property. This, so for example, SRC is a very popular one, or href for like a link tag at the A tag, or like a title for like a hover text for like an image, like some other kind of text, or like a div, for example. But do be in mind that you can vBind any property, the keyword being any. Remember that for next week as we talk about some other stuff that uses vBind in ways you don't think seems, doesn't seem proper, but works really well. Next is the vIf directive. So vIf will conditionally render something to the screen. So if the condition, aka the Boolean, is false, the element is removed from the page. And any element or child element is also removed or added from the page. It's important to note here that when we say removed, we actually do mean removed. Oftentimes what you might see occur is, for example, in like other libraries, by removed, what they mean is like this what's called like the CSS display : none, meaning is like hidden from the page. In reality, Vue physically tears it out of the HTML and will re-add it back in whenever we change the condition to true. And so we can like say, for example, like an error or like a warning message, we can set up the error warning message to only appear and then hide other times, or whatever else you may think you kind of work around. But that's why vIf comes in handy to kind of change what the page actually loads in real time. To use vIf, it's really simple. You just type vIf equals, kind of like you would like an HTML property, and the name of a JavaScript variable in quotes. As the variable is modified, Vue will reevaluate whether to add or remove the element. So I can see here this little div tag where I have div space v-if equals, and then the variable in quotes should see. Therefore, if should see is true, then this little div tag will be shown. And if should see is false, then this variable, this div tag will not be shown on the page. Now, it's important to note here that the JavaScript rules for truthiness and true do apply. So unless you know what you're doing, just stick with only setting your variables equal to true or false. Remember, stuff like the number 1 will become true, or the number 0 become false, or like the string 1 also becomes true in some cases. So to avoid stuff like where bugs might occur by you changing stuff you didn't want to change, make sure that should see only has a value of true or false. Next is vModel. This is a little bit more of a kind of a weirder one, but it's definitely extremely useful. You'll see examples of it literally everywhere in React. Vue vModel will track input to a text box and change and save its changes to the variables. If you're familiar with the idea of what's called controlled input in other libraries, it's almost the exact same. A very common example is like React's controlled input. I'm going to go back to React because I know some people here did take React last semester. And if you did, you might be familiar with the idea of controlled inputs for the final project. Every keystroke will automatically be saved to a variable that we can use elsewhere. So for example, to display some text. So how do we use vModel? To use it, it's really simple. We just type vModel equals and a variable name in quotes to bind the input box and that variable. Please note that it is different from the actual vbind directive. Once again, vbind binds properties and vModel will actually also bind the kind of, well, I wouldn't say bind. It'll change the input box, kind of like vbind will, but it also will sync up changes made from the element. So whenever you type something inside here, it'll be synced to the value of message. So message at any time will always be the same as the what you see as a user in the input text box. All right, time for demo program number 2. Let's hop into VS Code and close out of these demo 1 files here. Like I said, the demo 2, really basic HTML page here. A few things to note. This first one here, just regular Vue text formatting. So you can see my app ID at the very top, regular formatting, looks just like it would in the last demo, last checkpoint as well. Here, we're testing vbind. So look at this code here. It's an image. Again, images need to have 3 things: alt, title, and source. So alt here is just, demo test image. Title is the source can change. And here's where the view comes in. So vbind src is linked to the variable image src, meaning whatever the value of image src is, it'll change the source to match. It'll change the source of the image to match that. Next is vif. So I have a div tag here, and vif can you see me? Where then if you can see it, if can you see me is true, you can see this div, the br, and this little text here. And if can you see me is false, this div tag will be removed from the HTML page. Finally, we have testing vModel. So I have 2 little tags here. I look at the bottom one first. Input vModel equals input message. What that means, again, remember, is that any changes I make in this little text box, this little input text box here, it will automatically be synced or automatically be set to the value of input message. And at the very top line on line 28, I have some more text formatting where I put input message, meaning whatever I type into the text box will automatically be saved to the actual value of input message, which will then be displayed to the screen. So how does this look? We can find out. Again, demo 2 here. Oh my God, by the way. No, it's not right. There we go. So first things first, we got our basic text formatting here. And then here is our, actually take it back. I made a mistake. I should go over the demo here. My bad, the actual the JS file first. So again, I use columns, you can use let, no problem. EL, that's just where we're mounting it. App is typically where you want to put it. So ID of app, hashtag app. Then we have this data field. So in my data field, I have a couple different fields here. My first one is a message set to testing some V directives. Image src points to this little picture of a Pokemon, I think it's a Bulbasaur. Then I have this can you see me, which again is for the vif, set to true, so we can see it. Then we have input message set to start, meaning that we will first see the word start appear in our text box. So let's run this code and see what happens. So we see it here. I want to copy this really quick just to make sure I have a backup image here. And you can see, let's look at the image source first. It's the Bulbasaur. Now, again, someone asked in my breakout rooms when we would ever change stuff via the browser console. When you're testing, you might do it quite often, but in like a real app, like a real website, you wouldn't. What you would do is you would have stuff like your V model changing variables for you, like a button changing variables for you. You would never be doing this on your own. But let's do it here quickly. So we have the first one. We're going to change. We're going to try to change the image source. So again, app is the name of my variable dot, and the variable name of my URL is image source. So image source, and I want to set it equal to this string. Ideally, we'll make it a string. And now if I run this code, watch what happens to this little Bulbasaur we see on screen. It'll change from this Bulbasaur to the logo for Software Saturdays, loaded from this other SRC. We pull the console back up. The old URL was some, Pokemon Sprite URL. This new URL is this logo for Software Saturdays, so you look the standard copy you guys see everywhere else. And that's where how Vue bind works. The instant we change the variable, the actual code, the actual page also changed to match. Next, VIF. So as everyone can see, we can see this little VIF div box down there. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, then, I don't want to see you anymore. App.can you see me? We'll make you false. Run this code and watch what happens. Boop, disappears. It's completely gone, hidden from the user. And so, like I said, you can have temporary things like, for example, info boxes or like warning messages appear to the user and disappear just as quickly. Finally, you want to look at is this V model. So remember, these both and this all use the same variable, the input message, meaning any changes you make to the two of them will automatically be synced. And here's where this comes in. If I make a change in this text box, for example, we delete start, look at the very top, it's changing. Produce software Saturdays. It's automatically changing the text format in the very top to match what I wrote down below. And so what you can do is have stuff like this text box, maybe even if you want to get crazy in your checkpoint, change the SRC of an image so that the user can change the SRC of an image. However you do that is up to you, but knock yourselves out. With that, are there any questions about demo number 2? Again, demo number 2 talks about vbind, vif, and vmodel. Okay, I am not seeing any questions. That is a-okay. So we'll just come back here. Oh, wrong one. Come back here. All right. Now we are almost towards the end of class today, so we have a little bit more to go over. Last things I'm going to talk about are the one more directive, vOn, and something called a computed property. So what is vOn? So vOn is what's called an event handler. In this situation, in this lesson, we're only going to handle button clicks, but in reality, we can handle any kind of standard JavaScript event, including button clicks, key presses, mouse presses, or even custom events we'll talk about next week. So vOn will handle these clicks. That's kind of similar to the buttons on click property, if you guys recall that from last week as well. The only difference here is it is controlled by Vue. This is extremely useful if you want your button to change Vue variables or do something with Vue that you didn't see anywhere else. Because it's kind of hard to describe, but how do we use vOn? So v-on : is how you would do it. The name of the event, and then add an equal sign, the name of a function name in quotes. This is the tricky part is coming in. The function must be defined in a separate section of the Vue instance. So here I have a button. Here I have a little vOn, click, equal sign, and then this method name here. Whenever I click, this button will trigger the click event, which, because on click, I have a vOn command, it'll run this method name. Now, how do we define method name? It's definitely a bit tricky. Wait till demo because we'll talk about it then. But these are defined in again, similar to the data structure of a key value where the key is method name and the value will be a function. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. So we'll talk about that in the demo program. All right, quick lesson into part 3, the Vue instance. So like I mentioned, the Vue instance has we're going to talk about 4 major kind of fields that have to be filled out for it to work properly. Elijah asks, is click a keyword here, or is it the name of a variable / method? Yeah, so if we pop back up here, click is just kind of predefined by Vue. There are a couple predefined event keywords. So they're kind of like keywords, actually. There's a click, there's like mouse up, mouse down, key up, key down. I think there might be a couple more, but I don't remember exactly. And then, of course, you can make up your own too, which we'll talk about next week. But click is, again, just predefined. You don't have to worry about defining it. Vue will take care of that for us. So again, here are the 4, I won't call them major, but important fields that you may want to be aware of in Vue. We have EL, data, methods, and then the underline here is a new one, computed. So you see EL, or element, which is the ID of the root element where we want to try to mount Vue, or kind of attach Vue to. Data is all the variables to format or bind stuff to. And method, which we just introduced, which we had done an example of it, is all of the methods for the event handlers. Finally is computed. Again, it's underlined because it's new. This is a bit tricky to explain verbally, so we're going to try to do it, but we'll show you off mostly in the demo program. These are variables whose value depends on the data, on some subset of the data variables. They're called computed because their value will change the second the corresponding data variable also changes. So again, they're similar to, so how do we lay out computed properties? It's a similar layout to the methods part, but this function must return a value. The field can then be treated like a variable and be used elsewhere. It's extremely hard to describe computed very well in words. So what we're going to do is quickly just jump into a demo program and show you off that way, because it's much, much easier to do it that way. Pull up demo number 3 here. So look at the HTML really quick. So I have this VF with the value toggle, and this other VF with the value other toggle. Keep that in mind. There are 2 separate data variables. Next, I have this little button. Now look here, the button V on click, so meaning whenever you click this button, it'll run the function or method set toggle. So again, pretty basic HTML file here. Here is demo number 3. First things first, EL, standard, looking standard. We'll come back to these 2. Data, again, standard. Message is testing some more V directives, and then toggle, true. But wait, where is other toggle? We don't see other toggle here. That's because other toggle is a computed property. But first, let's look at methods. So set toggle. So again, set toggle was the name of the function that is handled after, is called after V on click. So once I click the button, it calls the function set toggle. Now set toggle is a function, so we say function, and then we have the brackets. You might put, if you needed rather parameters, you put them here. Otherwise, you just don't put anything there. And then you have your good old, function like brackets. And what this does is it sets this dot toggle equals not this dot toggle. So this is why I was spending a little bit more time in this demo program here. How many of you guys are familiar with the idea of this keyword, either in JavaScript, in C++, in Java? Anyone have any kind of familiarity with know what that means? It's very similar to the self keyword in Python, if you know that. Any takers? Yes, it refers to the current instance. Thank you, Elijah. Yes, it's exactly right. So if you're not familiar with programming too much, if you never kind of dabble with something called object-oriented programming, you may not know what this refers to. Well, simply enough, this, or the keyword THIS, this refers to what's called, again, as Elijah mentioned, the current instance. Meaning, we want to say, okay, from within Vue, access toggle. Now, here's the tricky part. A lot of people make a mistake on. If we don't include this, so we just say, we actually remove this before the toggle here. What this will do is try to redefine toggle to be a local variable. But wait, I say toggle up here, right? So like, isn't it this toggle? No, because at the end of the day, Vue is technically is a class. It stores toggle as a class variable. And so to tell it that we want to talk about the classes toggle and not the local variable toggle, we must say this dot toggle, meaning this is, all right, I want to talk about this class's toggle is set to the opposite of the current toggle. Meaning this is set true to false and false to true. It's pretty basic. The not sign here is for inversion. And a way to tell is if you're in VS Code, other text editors might have this property, I'm not sure. If you're changing the class variable, the name of your function will turn kind of with a little greenish blue color. Whereas if you just kind of have it just changing a local variable, like, here, it kind of has this little, I won't call it yellow, but like yellow-white color. So again, that's how functions, the methods field works. It's the name, function. If you have parameters here, clicks do not give you parameters. You do not need them. And then, your brackets. The key takeaway here is this. If you want to modify a Vue variable, you must use the this dot keyword. Next is the computed field. So if you guys recall from our slides, computed fields refer to the actual fields or refer to a variable where the data depends on, and the value depends on a value in the data field. So it's structured kind of like you would the methods field. So it's the name of the field, colon, function, and then your function like brackets. The difference here is, unlike in the methods section for the event handlers, the computed functions must return a value. It's very important. They must return a value. If they don't return a value, then it's going to give you kind of like a blank null variable. It's going to give you a lot of bugs in your code. Similarly, if you return a value from the methods field, that value will kind of be ignored. No one's catching that value. So we look at this. Other toggle, so function again, return because it's a computer property, the not this toggle. So this kind of seems similar, but it's all right. This is going to say if toggle is true, other toggle is going to be false. And if toggle is false, then other toggle will be true. This is kind of a convoluted example. You wouldn't really ever use it like this. There's other better ways to do computed properties, but here's the way we're going to cover it, only because it kind of flows with what we're talking about here. So how do we use this in our code? Well, let's pop up our demo 3 here. So we'll quickly reload this page. First, we have this little div here. This div has a little gray background. The text now you see. Can everyone see that okay? Is it coming across okay in Zoom screen share? Should be large enough, but I'm not 100% sure. It's good, perfect, fine. Now, if I press the toggle button, watch what happens. It's going to, remember, if you recall back, it's going to turn toggle, the variable, the opposite of what it was. So it was true. So I'm pressing toggle, it will turn this dot toggle into false. All right. Then remember again, the other toggle property, which is the other div that was underneath this one, has the computed value of the not this dot toggle, meaning it's the opposite of whatever toggle is. So when I press this button here, it's going to set this dot toggle to false, and then it'll reevaluate other toggle to become true. So as you can see, it changes it. And we look at our code here, look at the HTML, it replaces this div here with this div here, because other toggle is now true, and sorry, this toggle is now false, and other toggle is now true. So we can just keep going back and forth if we want to. No toggling to your heart's content. Okay, that was the demo program. Are there any questions about VON or computed properties? Okay, I don't see any at the current moment. So with that in mind, let's head back to our PowerPoint. So we're kind of ending off our lesson for today. It's a little bit early, a little bit shorter today, only because I want to give everyone time to practice using V directives. So VueJS has a lot of useful features. We only covered like the first, I would even say, maybe even 10% of them. We will go over a lot more of these features that we can use these next 2 weeks. So again, that's intermediate and then NoSQL databases. But if you want to kind of get a little bit of a head start, you can go to this URL here. This is the official VueJS guide. I love this guide. I think all the adventures can tell you that I love this guide. If you want to just kind of review or practice, even get a little bit ahead, we covered these top couple ones here, up to here, handling user input. If you want us to review, practice, even go more in depth in some of them. The guide is very well written. It gives you great examples of kind of what we talk about in class today. A lot of my examples are kind of actually based off of their examples, so it's really, really useful. Some of it may seem a little bit complicated. Don't worry about it too much. If it's not making sense, just wait to ask me about it next time. Oh, I think we're not full screen. There we go. All right, before we jump into checkpoint number 2, so we'll kind of end this off for today. I want to first thank you everyone for coming. Please give us some feedback. You guys can get the form right here. And if you have any questions, let us know in review hours right there. Checkpoint number 2. I know we ended off about say 30 minutes early today. Please do not head out of the meeting. Please stay on the call or stay in the meeting, and please make sure you finish this checkpoint. V directives are essential to VueJS, and you will be very confused and lost if you don't practice them right now. So the checkpoint here is try to combine V directives for complex actions. If you don't know what that exactly means, or what you want to do with that just yet, an example I might have for you is try to change the source of an image, do like a text box, and have the title of the image change via a button click or something. Again, up to you. Just try to see, all right, how can we make like really fun web apps that kind of do multiple things using only V on directive?